It all starts on a dark and stormy night in a village with Eastern-style architecture. A mysterious figure in a straw hat appears before a grand gate. Suddenly, a flash of lightning illuminates everything, revealing our main character standing on the steps. Down below, dozens of armed guards were already waiting, ready for a fight. One of the soldiers looks furious, grinding his teeth in pure hatred. And just like that, the guards shout, recognizing the nameless hero, and order the attack. In the blink of an eye, the guards scream, psyching themselves up. Then, they charge toward the lone figure. Even surrounded on all sides, the swordsman remains perfectly calm. He grips his sword tightly, preparing for the counterattack. With a single swift and precise movement, he cuts down several enemies at once. The look of terror on one guard's face shows he never even saw the attack coming. Underneath the hat, our protagonist's eyes show nothing but pure determination. The swordsman keeps moving forward without hesitation as the rain gets heavier. Before him, more enemies appear, yelling for everyone to take him out. Without a second thought, he stumps hard on the ground, splashing water everywhere. He then spins his sword, creating a red trail around him. Even surrounded by a mob of enemies, he shows no fear. With that, he tightens his grip on his weapon's hilt even more. He then unleashes another swift and brutal strike on his adversaries. Our protagonist moves like a blur across the battlefield. Just then, a huge brute appears from behind, ready to catch him off guard. The big guy yells with a grin on his face, thinking he's already won the fight. However, his blade stops just inches from the mysterious hero's neck. Suddenly, a blue light erupts from the swordsman and hits the enemy square on. The brute is in shock, wondering how he was hit from behind. Under the hat, our protagonist's gaze remains as cold as ice. And so, the defeated enemy's hand falls lifelessly into a puddle of water. When it's all over, the lone warrior is the only one left standing. Finally, the hero sits down in the courtyard to rest after the long battle. Suddenly, a man with a snake tattoo on his back appears, sitting on the porch. His clothes indicate he's the boss of the place that was just invaded. He then turns around, revealing his old and scarred face. From there, the man waits alone in the courtyard under the pouring rain. At this point, our protagonist approaches, and the two finally meet. With that, the two warriors stare each other down, serious and menacing. The old man breaks the silence and asks if he's the so-called nameless hero. Our protagonist says nothing, just standing there in silence. The boss taunts him, asking why a hero would hide himself away so much. And so, the swordsman coldly replies that he is no hero. The old man is confused and questions him about why he took out his men. With his eyes glowing red, he repeats that he's not a real hero. Our protagonist's answer leaves the gang leader stunned. The old man starts laughing, saying he managed to fool everyone. But the swordsman says he never fooled anyone. They just chose to believe it on their own. The old man finds that interesting and draws his sword, which emanates a blue aura. He says that even if he goes down today, he'll have no regrets. With red eyes, he yells for the protagonist to bring it on. Our protagonist also prepares for battle, his own sword now engulfed in flames. The gang leader gets ready to use his most powerful technique. In that moment, time seems to stop, and everything goes into slow motion. A single raindrop hits the ground and explodes, creating a tiny ripple. With a red glint in his eye, the swordsman lunges forward in an instant. The old man can barely track the mysterious hero's movement. In the blink of an eye, they cross paths, and the battle is suddenly over. Right after, our protagonist lands calmly on the ground. His sword is now completely covered in the enemy's blood. From there, he starts walking out of the destroyed village. With a small smile on his face, he sheathes his sword. Finally, he takes off his hat, revealing his tired but victorious face. Red petals fall over a scene of destruction, with bodies everywhere. A man lies on the ground with the symbol of the sect on his back. In front of a large temple, a massive crowd of warriors has gathered. At the forefront are the leaders of various sects, their expressions grim. One of the masters wonders if this place is really the Mount Hoa he once knew. At this, a monk just observes the scene of devastation in complete silence. Another leader shouts that this is the work of a demon, but then notices something moving. Way in the back, among the bodies, a lone figure is standing. Slowly, the man walks toward the army, revealing his wounded face. The leaders are shocked when they recognize the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. The old swordsman says he's going to take them all down, one by one. And with that, he unleashes a powerful wave of red energy toward the army. Faced with this, the monk shouts for everyone to brace for the attack. The red energy hits the warriors on the front line head on. The attack plows forward mercilessly, destroying everything in its path. One of the sect leaders watches the scene with a look full of hatred. In the midst of the chaos, a demonic figure glows with a red aura. At this, the man with the mustache yells furiously, telling the scumbag to show himself. In response, a hand emerges from the darkness, holding the head of the former leader. The monk from the Shaolin sect and the master of Wuding are speechless at the sight. Beside them, the representatives from Qingqing and Nangang also look on. In front of everyone, our protagonist appears and mocks the sheer number of people. One of the old men gets angry at the young man's audacity and tells him to shut his mouth. He then demands to know who the youth is and why he committed this massacre. Our protagonist says he came because he heard Mount Hua was the strongest. And with that, he crushes the sect's plague with just one hand. Right after, the defeated leader's head is shown on the ground. The young warrior coldly states that the rumors weren't very reliable. The leaders are in shock seeing the head of the Mount Hua leader. Without a second thought, the young man throws the head toward the crowd. He taunts the army, saying that since they came as a pack, they must be stronger. With his eyes glowing, one of the masters becomes possessed by rage and fury. And so, the leaders unite and shout that they will take him out to honor their sect. With that, the four warriors attack together, using their special techniques. But our protagonist just smiles and says that this place has finally gotten interesting. Suddenly, the image glitches, revealing that it was all a virtual reality game. Right after, the young man takes off his VR headset with a satisfied look. He's sitting on a couch in a dark room after a long gaming session. The young man wonders if a coordinated attack of that level was too much for him. Next to him is the equipment and the box for the game called EVR Online. It's a martial arts game famous for its extreme violence and realism. Even with tons of emails calling for the game to be shut down, he thinks there's nothing else like it. While watching TV, he thinks that next time, he'll use a quieter method. Just then, the news reports that the president of a major company is missing. With a thoughtful look, the young man considers that an assassination would also work. Suddenly, a mysterious voice begins to echo in our protagonist's dark room. The voice continues to whisper, begging for someone to save her. Hearing the cry for help, he remembers his mission and his target. Without wasting a moment, the young man grabs a sword that was beside the couch. The scene changes, and we see a man on his knees, begging for his life. With a bruised face, the man cries and pleads for mercy. At this, our protagonist appears, holding a giant sledgehammer. With a terrifying smile, he asks if the man really wants to be spared. The man plays innocent, saying he doesn't know why he was kidnapped. Our protagonist doesn't buy a word of it, and threatens him with the sledgehammer. Right after, photos of the man's crimes are revealed, leaving him in shock. The young man says that if he hadn't done anything wrong, he wouldn't have become his prey. Desperate, the man begs for forgiveness and says he's sorry. But our protagonist attacks him, remembering the words, "Spare me." With a cold smile, he finishes the phrase for himself in a grim tone. He says those words are getting tiring and attacks with his sledgehammer. With that, a brutal blow lands squarely on the criminal's face. Our protagonist starts beating the man without a shred of mercy. The man attempts a counterattack, but the young man dodges with ease. He then blocks the enemy's punch, breaking his fingers. Even injured, the criminal curses the young man with a look of pure hatred. Suddenly, the man gets up with glowing eyes and promises revenge. This sudden change leaves our protagonist a little surprised. The now stronger thug leaps to attack, yelling that he's going to end him. But the young man manages to block the blow with his weapon, creating a shockwave. The criminal is stunned to see his attack was so easily defended. From there, our protagonist unleashes a powerful red aura from his body. He then lands a devastating punch to the enemy's stomach. The man's face contorts in pain as he's completely overpowered. Finally, the young man ends the fight with one last blast of purple energy. The criminal is thrown backward by the force of the impact. Completely defeated, he falls to the ground, his face all banged up. Terrified, he drags himself away, begging the young man not to come any closer. He screams in desperation, saying he doesn't want to be taken out, no matter what. Our protagonist explains that most humans are like herbivores, but there's a carnivorous minority that hunts and devours the weaker ones. The criminal looks to the side and sees the reflections of his victims in the glass. The young man then reveals himself to be a hunter of these predators. The young man's shadow covers the thug, who is paralyzed with fear. With a glowing red eye, he prepares for the final blow. He drags his sledgehammer as the man begs him to stop. The thug cowers, yelling for the scumbag not to come near him. Suddenly, the door to the place is kicked open violently. Several heavily armed police officers storm into the room. They surround our protagonist and yell for him not to move. From among the officers, a man in a suit introduces himself as Dong Bongsu. Right after, he shows his badge and places our protagonist under arrest. The detective stares at him seriously as the young man's eyes glow red. Our protagonist wonders how the police managed to find him. Suddenly, the detective fires a warning shot into the air. He points the gun and warns that the bullets are real, so he better stay put. Faced with the entire police squad, our protagonist shows no fear. With his red eyes, he carefully observes the situation. He notices that the detective's gaze is quite similar to that of a sociopath. With a smirk, the detective asks if the young man knows something. He reveals that the scumbag on the floor took the lives of 6 women. On top of that, he tortured and took pictures of all of them before finishing them off. The bodies nearby belong to other similar lowlifes, almost all of them killers. These guys are like carnivorous beasts that prey on innocent civilians. Finally, our protagonist reveals himself as a hunter of these scumbags. Our protagonist says they've got it all wrong. The target isn't him, it's the thug. Detective Dong Bong-soo lights a cigarette and asks disdainfully if that's really true. But he says all he sees is a psycho who kidnaps and eliminates people. Our protagonist looks to the side with a look of pure disappointment. And so he realizes that, as expected, there's no point in talking to the police. With that, he tightens his grip on his weapon's hilt even more. Faced with the situation, the detective yells for him to stop and shoots without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, our protagonist moves like a blur to the side. The bullet hits him square in the chest, creating a large spray of blood. As he falls, he thinks that if he gets a next life, he has one wish. He hopes it's a place with plenty of beasts to hunt without any worries. A place like the Murim world he played so much would be perfect for that. Suddenly, a blue light envelops everything, and the scene begins to change completely. Our protagonist wakes up gasping for air, with no idea what just happened. He wonders if he's alive, because he's sure he took a fatal shot. In front of him, a heavy, set man is surprised that he's still breathing. Our protagonist just stares at him with a cold gaze and one red eye. The man gets angry at the kid's audacity and calls him a little punk. With that, he grabs him violently by the collar of his clothes. He then yells about how much trouble it was to drag him here. With tears in his eyes, the young man wonders if he should just finish him off right there. The man is spooked by his look and threatens him before running off. Alone, the young man watches the man leave with a dark expression. He tries to get up, but his body won't respond properly at all. The man leaves him behind, lying on the dirty floor. Suddenly, an immense pain shoots through his entire body like lightning. He collapses to the ground, powerless, and complains that his body is a complete wreck. Just then, he notices he's lying on a soft animal hide. Confused, he starts looking around, trying to make sense of the situation. A moment later, he looks at his own hands and sees that they're not his. He looks down at his body and realizes he's incredibly thin and weak. Touching his back, he feels several old scars and wounds. Confused, he drags himself to a small window to see where he is. His red eyes widen as he recognizes the landscape outside. He sees a village with very familiar Eastern-style architecture. From that, he realizes he's truly in the world of Murim. With no strength left, he ends up passing out on the cold, dirty floor. Tears of joy begin to stream endlessly from his eyes. With a smile, he remembers that his last wish came true. A screen appears welcoming player Dong Bong-soo to Murim Online. The scene changes to a stable where the young man is working, cleaning the place. He's surrounded by horses as he goes about his daily chores. Suddenly, a man throws the door open and calls him by the name Sozum. The young man turns around startled and recognizes him as his master Machil. The master pinches his nose because of the smell and tells the kid to follow him. The young man stammers, saying he hasn't finished cleaning the stable yet. At this, Machil lands a hard punch on the kid's face without warning. The master becomes furious and yells, asking if that sounded like a request. He grabs him and says the Dan family was kind enough to take in an orphan like him, and so, he reminds him that he's nothing more than a simple slave. Our protagonist's eyes fill with fear and desperation from the humiliation. Soon after, they arrive at a smithy where an old man is waiting for them. A large man asks the blacksmith where Machil is and why Dong-o came. Dong-o explains with a smile that Machil is out having fun with some girls. He makes a drinking gesture to make it clear what the master was up to. The old blacksmith says he doesn't care, but it'll be tough for just two of them. Their task is to move a massive pile of old swords and weapons. Dong-o starts laughing and says they have a great workhorse right there. And with that, he lands a violent kick on our protagonist's back. Lying on the ground, Dong-o asks what Sozum is doing and tells him to get up. With a furious look, Dong-o yells at him to get up and move the weapons. He then rubs his hands together, remembering he has plans of his own. He scoffs, saying our protagonist will have to work alone today. With that, the brute leaves, leaving the young man collapsed on the ground. The blacksmith just watches the scene with a look of pity and concern. With no other choice, the young man starts carrying the sack of weapons on his back. Even though he falls several times, he continues the hard work without giving up. The old man congratulates him on his effort, but says he should rest a bit. He notices that the young man's face doesn't look good at all, and is very pale. The blacksmith says he looks like someone on the verge of collapsing, but the kid insists he's fine. As he walks, his vision blurs, and he hears his name from far away. A voice in his head asks if he wants to keep living like an insect. With no strength left to continue, he finally collapses on the ground from exhaustion. In that moment, his eyes open with a new, cold determination. Before him, a dark, giant figure asks why he isn't moving. With an empty gaze, the young man stammers an apology, not understanding the situation. Without warning, a powerful fist flies toward his face with great force. He wonders where it all went wrong. Was it when his family perished in a typhoon? Or maybe the mistake was knocking on the Dan family's door just to survive. With every blow, he remembered all the humiliation he endured in that house. Finally, he concludes that his life had been a mistake since the day he was born in this place. Deep in his mind, a mysterious voice begins to beg for him to save him. Back in reality, our protagonist is lying on the cold floor of a stable. But now his eyes glow red with a new, cold determination. With a sinister smile, he gets up from the floor, ready to change his fate. From there, he walks back inside the stable with firm steps. Seeing his reflection in the water, he remembers that this body's name is Sozum. Right after, he coughs, feeling the weakness and pain of this thin body. He looks around the small, dirty place where he's been forced to live until now. Our protagonist recognizes it as the same stable from his memories. He realizes that the real Sozum passed away from the beating, and he entered the body. Suddenly, the young man notices something strange and gets a bit confused by the situation. Before him, a large blue screen appears out of nowhere, glowing intensely. The screen welcomes him to Murim Online, and he recognizes the status window. Meanwhile, Machil is walking through the village carrying a bowl of food. He complains that he's the only one in this family who cleans up everyone else's mess. With an annoyed look, he grumbles that the guy should have just gone home. He says the guy ran into Pang Dorian, who's famous for his bad temper, and so, the master is furious for having to clean up after that idiot. With a dark look, he starts to consider if he shouldn't just finish him off right there. His thoughts turn dark as rage takes over him. But he quickly dismisses the idea, thinking it's too risky. He knows that if he gets caught, it's his head on the line, so he kicks the door open hard instead. With that, he throws the bowl at the young man, yelling that he's useless. The bowl falls to the ground next to our protagonist, who remains silent. With a cold gaze, our protagonist begins to analyze the current situation. He figures it's been 2 weeks since he woke up in this place. During that time, he's gathered information through Machil and from what he's seen outside. The first thing he discovered is that they use Chinese here. But this isn't China. He watches the guards training with swords in a nearby courtyard. The reason he's sure this isn't China is quite simple. In this world, martial arts are real, with people flying and moving at high speeds. A man practices a sword strike with superhuman speed. An entire army of warriors trains in perfect sync in the courtyard. With his red eyes, he understands the true nature of this world. And so, he concludes that in this place, martial arts are alive and well. The second thing he noticed was the status window in the game's system. To be more precise, the Murim Online window is functional, and only he can see it. Clenching his fist, he confirms that even with the system, this place is real. He realizes that the people here have their own emotions and wills. He reminds himself that the people here are alive and moving for real. They aren't just NPCs in a game, they are beings with lives of their own. With that, he wonders if he's a human or just a player in this world. Looking at the blue screen, he's amazed by the whole situation. Suddenly, Dongo appears at the door with a mocking smile on his face. He says that while the kid was resting, he took a beating because of some idiot. From there, the brute approaches with a look full of anger. But our protagonist stands up and faces the man without any fear. He then picks up the bowl of food that was on the floor. Without a second thought, he starts to eat everything all at once. Dong-O becomes furious at his audacity and threatens to finish him right there. When the punch comes, he blocks the attack precisely with the bowl. With the big guy surprised, our protagonist lands a punch on his face. His red eyes glow intensely, showing his new determination. In an instant, he grabs Dong-O's neck with brutal force. On the ground, Dong-O says that the guy he knew is long gone. Our protagonist just growls, looking at the man with pure hatred. He coldly replies that the person Dong-O knew passed away a long time ago. With a snarl of pure rage, he prepares to end this once and for all. Without hesitation, he lands a violent punch on the brute's face. Dong-O's expression fills with terror as blood gushes from his mouth. With a sinister smile, our protagonist continues the assault without any mercy. Blood splatters everywhere as the young warrior unleashes his fury. After a barrage of blows, he stops and stands amidst a red aura. He closes his eyes, feeling the heat of the moment, and reflects on what just happened. He then wonders if he's a human or a player, but says it doesn't matter. Looking at the destruction, he is certain that this place is reality. He feels the law of this world's survival of the fittest, where the strong are kings. In this place, he can hunt without having to hide who he really is. He sees himself as a predator, free to act like a wolf in its natural habitat. He thinks that, in fact, there are even stronger, more monstrous predators out there. These monsters roam freely in the jungle called Gango that exists outside. With a smile, he says that as soon as his body recovers, he'll start hunting again. For true predators, this place is a paradise full of opportunities. In this place, the Divine Murim is where he finally feels at home. Back in the present, he sits next to Dong-O's body to rest. He says the guy isn't worth hunting, but he needs to check something. With that, he turns to the body on the floor, ready for his test. Upon saying the word inventory, a large blue screen appears before his eyes. Looking at the screen, he notices that something here is different from the game. In Murim Online, the inventory was a grid with one item per slot, but the inventory window in this place was a single, large space. Curious, he puts his hand inside the strange, floating blue screen. The space inside is incredibly large, at least 100 pyong in size. He looks at his hand and then at Dongo's body, getting a new idea. He approaches the body and remembers doing the same thing in the game. With that, he places his hand on the man's face and says, "Inventory storage." The body starts to glitch like a computer bug and gets sucked into the screen. Our protagonist watches in shock as everything is enveloped in a blue light. The blue energy sucks the body in completely, leaving no trace behind. Surprised, he realizes this is a very useful ability for getting rid of bodies. He wonders if living things can also go in and if they would stay alive inside. With a thoughtful look, the young man decides he needs to run a few more experiments. The scene changes to the next day in a courtyard with several men talking. While our protagonist sweeps the floor, two men are gossiping about something. The two men laugh with mocking smiles on their faces as they chat. The young man continues his work but pays close attention to the two guards' conversation. Suddenly, one of the men turns toward our protagonist angrily. Without warning, the man lands a hard slap across the young warrior's face. He calls him useless and asks if he's suddenly gone mute. With a strange smile, our protagonist stammers, faking dementia. The guard grabs him by his clothes and calls him a mute, telling him not to mess around. He then points to a horse and orders the kid to take it for a walk. The young man bows in obedience, stammering to maintain his disguise. The man gets annoyed that he can't even speak properly and tells him to get going. From there, our protagonist walks the horse through the village streets. He observes the bustle of the local market with its many people and stalls. His eyes analyze every detail of this new environment with great attention. Suddenly, he notices some children hiding in an alley, watching him. Without hesitation, one of the boys throws a rock at him with a grin. The rock hits our protagonist square in the head, and he turns around surprised. With a cold gaze, he feels the impact and the blood trickling down his face. The children start making faces and mocking him, calling him stupid Sozam. One of the boys calls him mute Sozam, but is quickly startled by his gaze. Before them, the young man transforms into a shadow with red eyes filled with pure fury. The boy rubs his eyes, not believing what he just saw. Our protagonist goes back to faking dementia and asks what happened. Without understanding anything, he just turns and continues on his way with the horse. Suddenly, the boy who is taunting him starts to laugh mockingly. The children go back to throwing things at him, calling him stuttering Sozam. As he walks, he ignores the insults about being mute and stupid. Not caring about anything, the young man keeps walking with his head down. The scene changes to Makil, who is complaining about having to clean weapons and about Dongo. He goes to Dongo's room door, wondering if he kicked the bucket. Upon opening the door, he's startled to see our protagonist walking out. Machil's eyes go wide, completely shocked by the situation. Looking inside, he sees that all the weapons have been cleaned and organized. He wonders if the little punk finished all of his work too. With a terrifying smile, our protagonist just stares at him in silence. Machil thinks he's changed after his near-death experience and now works fast. He wonders suspiciously if the kid has finally gotten his act together. Just then, our protagonist holds out a small pouch of coins to him. Machil opens the pouch and sees that it's full of money from his work. His eyes widen, completely shocked by the young man's gesture. He starts laughing, saying the kid has finally learned how to live in this world. And so, he gives him a hard slap on the shoulder and tells him to keep it up. Machil leaves, happy with the money, while the young man watches him from a distance. With a cold gaze, he thinks that the idiot doesn't even realize that's his own money. Walking through the city, Machil says you have to be flexible to survive. He looks at the pouch of coins and says that today his pockets are full. With a smile, he decides that instead of Angang, he'll see Chozian's face tonight. He arrives at a large building and excitedly tosses the pouch of coins into the air. A man at the door greets him with a smile and calls him Brother Machil. Machil asks the man to call Chozian for him with a lecherous look. The man looks sad and mentions Angang, the girl he always asks for. Machil is surprised but confirms with a smile that tonight he wants Chozian. The man at the door gives him a sly look, full of ulterior motives. He holds out his hand and says that if the guy has money, he can have whatever he wants. With a smile, the man thanks him and sends him to the room at the end of the second floor. Alone in the room, Machil waits anxiously for the girl to arrive. Suddenly, a female voice from the other side of the door announces that she's coming in. Right after, the beautiful Chozian enters the room and Machil is mesmerized. He thinks she's beautiful and incomparable to the other girl he knew. A little embarrassed, he clears his throat and invites her to sit down. The young woman kneels before him and offers to pour him a drink. With a goofy grin on his face, he agrees excitedly and tells her to pour away. As she serves him, he compliments her hands but is being watched through a hole in the wall. He calls her closer as the red eye continues to spy on everything. The mysterious eye in the wall observes every movement inside the room with attention. It turns out that the one spying on everything is our protagonist, with a dark look on his face. The scene cuts back to the receptionist, who instructs him to go to the second floor. He thinks with disgust that Machil is going after a girl who could be his daughter. With that, he looks at the pouch of coins he received as payment from the man. But he smiles and thinks that the money isn't to blame for anything and happily accepts it. Suddenly a dark figure appears at the door, and the man greets him confused. He recognizes the silhouette and asks if that's Sozum by any chance. The man quickly gets up to confront the young warrior who just barged in. He calls him a mute and asks condescendingly if he knows where he's sticking his nose. With a furious look, he threatens him, telling him to get lost right now. Suddenly, the young man shows a pouch of coins identical to Machil's. With difficulty, our protagonist stammers the girl's name Angang. The man takes the pouch of coins with a greedy smile on his face. He opens the pouch and confirms that it's full of money, just like the last one. His eyes light up as he realizes he can make a double profit tonight. With a smile, he sends him to the second room at the end of the hall. With the path clear, our protagonist heads to the room where his target is waiting. Inside, Machil is getting ready but gets spooked when he sees a shadow at the door. Suddenly, our protagonist attacks him from behind and starts to choke him out. With a piece of cloth, he tightens it around the man's neck with all his strength. Machil panics as he feels the air leaving his lungs. His eyes widen in pure terror as he stares his end in the face. He tries to break free, but his hands are already too weak to fight back. Hateful, he calls him a scumbag, but the young man doesn't stop the attack. Right after, our protagonist lands a brutal punch to his face. Without giving him time to breathe, the young man lands a powerful knee strike. Machil's body flies across the room from the violence of the blow. The young man's red eye glows with uncontrollable fury. He moves in and continues to strike the man on the floor without mercy. In Machil's eyes, only the purest, most complete desperation remains. Finally, his body falls lifelessly to the floor, ending the fight for good. With the body now lifeless, he holds it by the face to confirm the job is done. Our protagonist sits behind the body with a sinister smile on his face. His red eyes glow with satisfaction at seeing his enemy defeated. In Machil's gaze, only the emptiness of the end and the blood from his veins remain. In the darkness, the young man's eyes shine like a predator's in the night. He then extends his hand to store the body in his inventory. With a psychopathic look, he prepares to clean up the crime scene. From there, his red eyes turn to the bed in the corner of the room. There he sees the girl Chizun lying down and seemingly asleep. Faced with this, he approaches the body to finalize his plan. The girl continues to sleep peacefully, unaware of what happened. Our protagonist sits beside the bed and watches her in silence. With a cold gaze, he analyzes the girl lying there, defenseless. He notices the marks on her face and the situation she's in. In his thoughts, he classifies her as a simple herbivore. He sees her as weak prey that has neither the strength nor the will to protect herself. With his objectives complete, he gets up and decides to leave the room. Alone, he stops and looks at the small crack in the wall he used earlier. It was through there that our protagonist spied on Machil before breaking in. Seeing the situation, he places his hand on the wall for his final move. With that, he uses the inventory and stores the man's body without a trace. Our protagonist is glad he practiced that skill beforehand. He knows it will be extremely useful for his future hunts. Suddenly, he remembers something and looks to the side with a thoughtful air. And so, just as he expected, the game's status screen appears before him. The screen shows that his experience bar increased after the fight. From that, he realizes that taking people out here actually gives experience points. He understands that if he accumulates enough points, he can level up. His red eyes gleam with the idea of becoming even stronger. With more power, he'll hunt more easily and accumulate experience faster. He realizes that in this place, he can become infinitely stronger. With a satisfied look, our protagonist lies down on the floor to reflect. The young warrior prepares to finish his revenge once and for all. His eyes fill with a terrifying calm after all the violence. With a smile, he places Machil's head in a hole and regrets not having a camera. Outside, the receptionist waits impatiently in the brothel's hallway. Soon after, the girl Angang comes running toward him in a hurry. He asks her if she's already in there, and the girl seems confused by the question. The man yells at Angang for taking so long and tells her to get in there already. The girl apologizes for being late and enters the room, afraid of being scolded. But the receptionist starts to suspect something and gets a serious look on his face. He wonders why they're taking so long in the room. With a thoughtful look, the man tries to understand what's happening. And so, he knocks on the door and calls for Machil and Chozian to come out. However, the only response he gets is complete and utter silence. The man gets angry at the silence and curses the scumbags for not answering. With a furious look, he starts yelling Machil's name impatiently. Suddenly, a scream of terror echoes from inside the room, startling the man. Without a second thought, he breaks down the door to see what's going on. Inside, the girl Chozian is huddled on the bed, trembling with pure fear. The receptionist's eyes go wide, completely shocked by the scene. A dark figure is hanging from the ceiling, swaying slowly. The person's feet are dangling in the air, indicating they're no longer among the living. It turns out the hanging body is Machil's, and the man is dumbfounded. The scene changes and shows the Anhui province, a land of rivers and plains. Because of its fertile land and lakes, the region's trade flourished. But where there's money, there are also thieves and bandits of all kinds. Because of this, martial arts sects emerged to defeat them and maintain order. Among all the sects that appeared there, some stood out more than others. The most famous was the Namgang family, but the largest sect was the Dan family. The Dan family is famous for its military strength and for the Black Crowd division. This division is so good at gathering information that it even surpasses the Beggars sect. However, lately, the Black Crow division has been very concerned about one issue. In a room, a man respectfully hands a scroll to his superior. This is Ji Dio, the leader of the division, and he looks very serious. The problem is a suicide epidemic that has already claimed nearly 100 people. Before, there were only 1 or 2 cases a month, but never so many at once. The leader suspects this isn't normal because the cases are too perfect. All the evidence points to suicide, and he wonders if that's even possible. With that, he asks who the first one to go was and finds out it was Machil. He finds it strange to hear that the victim was a member of the Dan family itself. From there, he wants to know exactly where the man took himself out. The answer is an inn, and the leader decides to investigate personally. The subordinate is shocked to learn that the head of the division is going there himself. But Ji Dio insists he needs to see the crime scene with his own eyes. From there, the division leader and his men arrive at the Bongyang Inn. He stops in front of a door and asks if this is the room where it happened. The receptionist confirms that's where he and Chozian found the body. With a serious look, the leader suspects the epidemic is actually a series of murders. And so, he enters the room and starts looking for clues about the culprit. After a search, he realizes it would be impossible for someone to get in without being caught. Therefore, the only remaining possibility for him is a wooden wall. He examines the wall up close and notices it has a very different structure. Ji Dio explains that if the wood were removed, it would become a passageway. But the big problem is that the wood of that wall has never been removed. With that, he looks up at the ceiling and asks how to remove the beams without destroying everything. The receptionist denies it, saying they are fitted into the floor and ceiling. With no apparent entry point, he goes back to thinking it really was a suicide. Given the situation, he asks if there was anyone in the room next to the crime scene. The man confirms there was a guest who arrived at the same time as Machil. With wide eyes, the leader asks who it was and finds out it was Sozum. Meanwhile, our protagonist walks a horse through the city streets. He thinks that the man he took out earlier gave him more experience than the others. From that, the young warrior deduces that his victim was a martial artist. And so, he understands that by taking out stronger people he gets more points. But he knows he's still weak and needs prey from among civilians and warriors. Suddenly, a brute with a wide grin appears, complimenting him. With that, the man and his gang surround him and tell him to greet them. Seeing that the young man doesn't respond, he accuses him of ignoring all of them. With a cold gaze, our protagonist identifies them as simple street thugs. He remembers that even though he was an idiot, Sozum is part of the Dan family. The young man wonders if the old Sozum really put up with these guys. Faced with this, the brute gets annoyed and punches the young man. A dark figure then grabs him and invites him for a private chat. And so, he's dragged along with the horse into a dark alley. With a cold gaze, our protagonist wonders if he can just finish them off right there. He considers using his inventory but knows that causing trouble here is risky. Besides, he figures they wouldn't give much experience and decides to back down. At this, the brute hits him with a punch and makes fun of his appearance. Suddenly, a shadowy figure appears in the alley and tells everyone to stop. The mysterious man complains to his cronies for not bringing him over carefully. The thug gets scared and calls him Leader Jang, and our protagonist observes. The so-called leader approaches the horse and says he was happy to hear the noise. He reveals that his boss is crazy about horses and wants to give this one as a gift. With a malicious smile, he asks the young man what he thinks of the idea. The gang leader's gaze fills with malice and ulterior motives. Our protagonist realizes the plan from the start was to take him out for the horse. But he thinks the thug chose the wrong prey and threatens him to make up his mind. The young warrior challenges him, saying to kill him instead of asking again. The brute is shocked to realize the young man can speak normally. Spurred by the young man's audacity, Leader Jang attacks with all his fury, but our protagonist uses his inventory and a blue light explodes out of nowhere. The young warrior pulls his sword from the screen with a determined look. Leader Jang is in shock, not understanding how he did that. With the sword in hand, he prepares for a brutal counterattack. At the same time, the horse is also sucked into the inventory. With that, an explosion of purple energy destroys everything around them. One of the thugs screams in desperation that it's sorcery. Suddenly, a screen appears, congratulating him on leveling up from level 1 to 2. From there, our protagonist unleashes a powerful red aura from his body. The brute is terrified and yells that the kid is a demon, and that they should run. But the gang leader orders everyone to attack the demon at once.